Here, by popular demand, following our greatest footballers since the year 2000 video, an awful lot of you asked us to do a series on the best players of each decade. I'd have loved to go all the way back to 1900 or even the 1890s, but due to a lack of images, we're starting in the 1940s. The 1940s was an unusual decade for football, marked by the lack of a World Cup due to the Second World War. It also gave birth to a national league in Germany, who went on to become footballing powerhouses, a heated rivalry between Real Madrid and Barcelona, which is just as intense today, and many great players who we celebrate here. Here are our 7 greatest footballers of the 1940s. Telmo Zarra. There are many great players who began their careers in the 1940s, such as Alfredo Di Stefano, or ended their careers in the 1940s, like Josef Menezes, but Telmo Zarra truly enjoyed his peak years throughout the entirety of the 1940s. He broke through in the Segunda Division in 1939 as an 18-year-old, before joining Athletic Bilbao in the top flight. 335 goals in 354 games followed, the vast majority of which came in the 1940s. Strong and aggressive, Zarra was a born goalscorer, and only Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo have scored more top-flight goals in Spain to this day. Zarra won 6 trophies with Bilbao, as well as scoring 20 goals from 20 caps for Spain, including one against England at the 1950 World Cup. Ángel LABRUNA. The greatest club side of the 1940s was almost undoubtedly the River Plate side known as the Machine, and you could make a case for 5 of their players making this 7. One who does just that is Ángel LABRUNA in 6th place. A key man in that outstanding front 5, LABRUNA was a really complete second striker who had fantastic movement and a clinical finish. He joined River Plate in 1939 and left the club 20 years later with a record of 317 goals in 515 games. He won 9 league titles and bagged 17 goals from 37 caps for the Argentine national team. Neil Franklin. It's easy to pack these kind of lists full of attacking players, but the greatest defender of the 1940s was almost certainly Neil Franklin. A defender decades before his time, Franklin was a technically gifted and highly intelligent centre-half who loved to bring the ball out from the back and pick passes out to the wings. He almost won a league title with Stoke City in the first post-war English season, but was ostracised in England after turning down the chance to play for England at the 1950 World Cup in favour of making a lucrative move to Colombia. Franklin became the most expensive defender in the world in 1951, but injuries prevented him from reaching the heights his game had reached in the 1940s. Adolfo PEDERNERA. Neil Franklin's transfer to Colombia, which we alluded to there, was largely facilitated by this man, Adolfo PEDERNERA. Regarded by many as the finest footballer in the world, he left Argentina at a time of footballer strikes and political upheaval to the FIFA-exiled Colombian League. His departure set the tone, and stars like Di Stefano and Franklin followed. PEDERNERA himself was a world-class withdrawn forward who was hard-working, brilliant on the ball, and both a goal-scoring and creating force. Valentino Mazzola. When people talk about the game's great number 10s, Valentino Mazzola's name should always get a mention. He played football as though it were a game of chess, and he was a grandmaster. A really intelligent player, his understanding of the game was such that he could play in virtually any position. You'd want him through the middle though, where he could utilise his tirelessness, passing ability, and skill on the ball to maximum effect. He was the star of the great Torino side of the 1940s, joining the club in 1942 and having his career cut short along with those of his teammates at the age of 30 in the tragic Superga air disaster. His son Sandro Mazzola went on to be a top-class professional himself, starring for Inter Milan and Italy. Jose Manuel Moreno. We warned you that the great River Plate side of the 1940s may crop up a few times, and the third and final player from that team to feature here is Jose Manuel Moreno. Of those few Argentines fortunate enough to have seen the 3 M's, Moreno, Maradona, and Messi all play, many maintain that Moreno is still the best of the 3. A really gifted footballer, Moreno was a maverick. He had wondrous technique and vision, which he twinned with a real eye for goal. He spent 11 years in 2 separate spells with River Plate, later turning out for their great rivals Boca Juniors and Medellin of Colombia. Stanley Matthews. England's view of themselves as the best team in the world up until the 1950s is often dismissed as mere arrogance, but that probably ought not to be the case. They were certainly the best team in Europe, their results against the World Cup winning Italians showed that, and most likely the best in the world. At the end of the 1940s, England had by far and away their best ever team, with more talent and depth than Alf Ramsey's 1966 side. The jewel in England's crown was Sir Stanley Matthews. A creative wide man the like of which has not been seen before or since, Matthews was an expert in beating fullbacks and supplying centre forwards. A wonderful athlete whose diet and training was probably half a century ahead of his time, those who witnessed Matthews in action tended to be left with little doubt over who was the best player on the planet. He began his career in 1932 and retired in 1965 at the age of 50, but the 1940s represented the pinnacle of his talents, even if the war prevented him from often displaying them. In 1947, he assisted 8 goals in 2 games, as England won 5-2 and 3-0 against Belgium and Wales, with Matthews setting up every goal. So that's it for our top 7, but there should be some honourable mentions in the video description below. Thanks for watching, give us a like if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe to HITC Sevens.